first application at DMV was a disaster. I made all possible and impossible mistakes. I misinterpreted nationality as ethnicity, and I wrote a short story about it because my ethnicity is not a simple one. I switched day and months in all the dates in that application. I don't know what I have written instead of social security number because I had no idea what it was at that time. But it wasn't the social security number for sure. The officer who was checking my application had to detangle all this mess I have made. And it wasn't easy because for me, many questions didn't make sense. And for him, many of my answers didn't. As he was going down my application, he seemed to be more and more irritated, at least in my eyes, until he got stuck actually. He read the question, hair color. I wrote yellow. He looked at me, then into my application, which by that time looked like a mess with all these corrections. Then he looked back at me, sighed, and said, "Ma'am, in California, we call this blonde." And I knew he wasn't talking about my hair color. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, if you ask me a very important question, and I spent more than 55 minutes thinking about it, what was the biggest surprise you wish you knew when you came to this country? I can ascertain I had no idea how often I'm going to put myself in a situation when I feel, sound, or look like a fool. Ta-da! Now, it's not something to be taken very easy for someone who has been built her confidence and trying to fight her fear for failure for all her life. And it's actually commonplace that when we're placed into a dangerous situation, there are two main responses. We can fly or we can fight. Now, flying wasn't an option for me, unless I was ready to literally buy a plane ticket and fly, abandoning my dream job, my new life, my new friends, my Toastmasters. No. Not an option. Of course, I can always fight, right? But not for long, because clowns do not make good fighters. So I came up with a third option. Very simple. Four-letter word. I have chosen to face the fact that I'm going to fail. Yes, I'm going to fail. There is no way around it. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to die. I'm just going to fail. And to explain you what I mean by facing this fact, I want to talk to you about three main actions this implies: accepting, collaborating, and experiencing. Imagine this fictional situation. You go for grocery shopping. In your background, you come from the country when nobody is going to offer you a bag in a store. Okay? You're supposed to bring yours with you. And it's not a bad habit, as we know right now. So you managed to find all the products you needed. You managed to find the cashier. You managed to pay for your buys. You managed to survive this dreadful small talk. Believe me, it's not easy. And now this beautiful, kind lady in front of you asks you a question which has no sense at all. No, you understand every word, but to you, it sounds like a childish game. You know the game, right? Rock, scissors, or paper. Plastic or paper? Scissors! It's very uncomfortable standing there, turning red in front line who is listening and looking, trying to come up with an answer, with something, so this awful, tricky lady will let you go finally. Yes, no, thank you, please, please, just let me go. You may not relate to this situation, but the remedy actually is, I think, universal, and it's collaborating. What I had to understand was these people who torturing me with their questions and misunderstanding are not my enemies. They're not exactly my friends all the time, but there is a lot of room for collaboration as long as I agree to be open, honest, and don't pretend that I'm more comfortable than I actually am. And to be honest with you, there is nothing comforting or comfortable in feeling like a fool, even if it has become your specialty.
Right.
For 12 years right now, I have been experiencing the discomfort over and over and over again. And each time it gives me a lesson which takes me one step closer to learning this new life context I am living in. And even if there is no lesson, there is always a story I can tell at Toastmasters.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests, and especially Tatiana. I'm evaluating Tatiana today on the manual Humorously Speaking on her #1 project. And the objectives for this speech is to, 1, prepare a speech that opens with a humorous story, 2, personalize the story, and 3, deliver the story smoothly and effectively. I'm going to go through each of those bullets and ascertain how she met each of those objectives. The first one, open with a humorous story. The first thing I wanted to point out was that you had a very long pause right before you started your speech, and I thought you did a great job in capturing our attention. I was looking down for a second. When I looked up, I saw you were looking us all in the eye, and you went around the entire room before you started speaking. And that was a great way to capture our attention. Your story about the DMV, the manual talks about telling a story and how to deliver a funny story, and it mentions 5 steps: the setup, the pause, the punchline, the punch word, blonde, and then that pause at the end. And I thought you gave like a textbook delivery of that funny story. The second point was to personalize the story. You're a naturally very funny, self-deprecating type of humor. You usually use that in any of your speeches, and I thought that you definitely use that throughout this speech itself. And there were just 3 parts of your speech that I particularly found funny. And first you wrote the F up here, and you said there's a 4-letter F word. I think everyone's kind of thinking of what hopefully you would write a different word, and you did. And then you also mentioned, you mentioned the dreadful small talk, and I think that's something that we all have experienced before, and that was something we could all relate to. And then lastly, your story, the rock, paper, scissors, paper or plastic. And I thought when you delivered that, you used so much vocal variety, and it really brought us into your story. The last point was deliver the story smoothly and effectively. I think in order to deliver an effective story, you can't have humor just by itself. You need to have something that comes along with it. And it's when you hear a great comedian, for example, it's not just the jokes. They also typically have a lesson that ties into what the joke was. And I think for you shared with us about finding lessons within the embarrassment. And I thought that was something that we could all universally relate to. Just 2 points for improvements. When you did write out the FAC, I think I was still stuck on your joke with the 4-letter F. Where so I missed the first F and A, and eventually I got collaborate and experience. But I think when you went through each point, if you maybe wrote out the words, it would have helped us have a visual on what those 4 points were. And the second part, the manual says don't laugh at your own story, and I understand that, but it doesn't say don't smile at your own story. And I think we know exactly what kind of jokes you tell. So I think as a group we understand that when you're self-deprecating, we can laugh with you. But I think if you're in an audience with new people, if you make a certain joke, they might not know whether they can laugh or not. So if you were to give a smile, it might help them give a cue that they can laugh along with you. Overall, I think that you met all your objectives with ease, and we're very lucky to be your audience for this manual, and I'm looking forward to your #2.